Hello, you're joining us again in the weekend edition of Into Vietnam, which summarizing the most outstanding business news and expert ideas on the economy in the week ending May the 25th. And here are the headlines. The Consumer Price Index edges down by 0.07% in May in Hanoi, while edged up by 0.36% in Ho Chi Minh City. Bloomberg says foreign investors put trust in Vietnam's market. The prospects of and threats to Vietnam economic growth in 2014 will be identified in the business talk, joined by the ADB top specialist on Vietnam's economy, Mr. Dominic Miller. First of all, let's begin with this week's figures. May's Consumer Price Index in the capital city of Hanoi edged down by 0.07%, while that of Ho Chi Minh City rose by 0.36% from April, driven by price hike of the food and foodstuff basket. Hanoi's Consumer Price Index decline is due to a fall of 0.57% in prices of food and foodstuff, which takes the largest percentage point in CPI calculation. Prices of housing and construction materials rebounded to rise by 0.51% this month after 3 consecutive months of decline. Prices of traffic reported the highest price hike this month, which jumped by 0.53%, as petroleum price hike and the government requested to control overloaded vans or trucks that forces transportation owners to raise the freight to offset the profits gained from earlier transporting overloading. In the meantime, Ho Chi Minh City's Consumer Price Index rebounded to rise this month after 2 consecutive months of fall. The city's Consumer Price Index dropped by 0.46% on month in March and eased by 0.04% on month in April. Comparing with a year ago, this month's CPI decreased by 5.04%, driven by price hike of education basket, as school fees and tuition were adjusted last September. Comparing with December 2013, Ho Chi Minh City May CPI rose 0.51%, driven by price hike of food and foodstuff basket up 1.01% and prices of traffic basket up 2.19%. 29 state firms have made initial public offerings on the Hanoi and Ho Chi Minh City stock exchanges, with a total value of nearly $1.7 trillion. On the Hanoi Stock Exchange, 25 state-owned enterprises issued their shares on the market, with 11 of them offering successfully 100% of the stakes. Members of the Ministry of Transportation dominated the IPO market with 9 companies. Big Lazara is the only state firm to be able to sell 10.1 million shares to foreign investors, making 52% of the total sold stakes. On the Ho Chi Minh Stock Exchange, only 4 state firms were equitized, bringing the total number of equitized SOEs nationwide to 29, which is not enough to meet the target of equitizing 1 state firm every day. According to the new report by the World Gold Council, gold demand in Vietnam is still relatively strong. In the first quarter, Vietnam consumed a total of 19.5 tons of gold, including 4.5 tons gold jewelry and 15 tons of gold bars or gold coins, increasing 5% year-on-year. In terms of value, gold jewelry consumption reached $186 million. Consumption of gold bars and gold coins reached $624 million, totaling $810 million, down 17% on year. And now it's time we updated some major macroeconomic and investment news. Foreign investors were net buyers on the Ho Chi Minh City Stock Exchange every day since April the 18th, the longest stretch of purchases since January. They added about $93 million to their holdings. According to data compiled by Bloomberg, international investors have bought a net of $188 million of Vietnam stocks in 2014, heading for the 9th straight year of purchases. US-based trade funds focused on Vietnam have received a net of $99.9 million this year, equivalent to almost 27% of their total market capitalization. That's the biggest increase of all 12 Asian countries tracked by Bloomberg. It also noted that Vietnam policymakers are trying to bolster an economy that the World Bank estimates to grow by 5.4% this year. Gross domestic product rose 4.96% in the first quarter of 2014, while inflation fell to the lowest level in the past 13 years in April. Indochina Capital in Vietnam said foreign investors think this is the best time to buy, adding that they like the valuation and they think the tension is just a short-term phenomenon.
The governor of the State Bank of Vietnam, Nguyễn Văn Bình, on May 21st committed to ensure security and safety for foreign banks and protecting the legitimate interests of foreign investors in Vietnam. The governor said despite complicated developments in the East Sea following China's illegal placement of a drilling rig in Vietnam's exclusive economic zone, the country's currency and gold markets remain stable. The governor also asked the foreign banks to continue their normal operation to well serve both domestic and international customers and inform the State Bank of Vietnam of difficulties they face so that it can take appropriate measures to help solve these shortcomings. They were also urged to fulfill their roles as bridge encouraging foreign investors to do business in Vietnam, as well as join hands with the Vietnamese government and the State Bank of Vietnam in maintaining a stable currency and gold market and solving difficulties in business for enterprises. According to the reports of Hanoi Statistics Office, total deposit of credit institutions in the city is estimated at 1.071 trillion dong, up 1% on month and up 2.4% compared to December 2013, in which savings up 0.8%, checking deposit up 1.2%, issuing notes increased by 0.4%. Total outstanding loans in May is estimated at 948 trillion dong, up 0.8% on year and up 0.3% from December 2013, in which short-term outstanding loans up 0.6% and medium and long-term one up 1.2%. After 4 months of negative growth, credits of credit institutions in Hanoi has seen positive growth. However, the growth rate is much lower than that of the whole industry. Data from the State Bank of Vietnam shows by the end of April, credit growth of the whole system reached 1%.
The latest report by the foreign investment agencies indicated the Republic of Korea officially surpassed Japan to take the lead among 36 countries and territories investing in Vietnam, with additional capital of $1.12 billion, accounting for 23.1% of the total FDI in the Southeast Asian country. Japan slipped to the second position with additional funds of $531 million, followed by Singapore with more than $479 million. The two biggest FDI projects in Vietnam include the Thang Long cement plant of Indonesia in Quảng Ninh province with more than $325 million, the South Korean Ishin plant in Tây Ninh with $177 million. Between January and April, 140 projects registered to add more than $1.62 billion of investment in their projects in Vietnam.
The Island Business Directory recently posted an overwhelmingly positive review of Vietnam on its website. The review stated that Vietnam has successfully shifted from the centralized planning to a socialist-oriented market economy, Over the past 2 decades, Vietnam has achieved impressive GDP growth rate, on average of 7%. Vietnam's open economy reached a two-way trade volume at around 160% of GDP. Vietnam now takes the lead in the world in exporting rice, coffee and cashew nuts, seafood, electronics, software, and crude oil. Among the newly emerging economies, Vietnam is considered to be the leading destination for foreign investors. Over the past 5 years, Vietnam has attracted $6.5 billion in foreign investment capital or FDI each year. A report by Ernst & Young was also referenced, which described Vietnam a rising star with an average GDP per capita increasing 6 times within the next 25 years. The review also emphasized that the number of households with an income of $30,000 per year in Vietnam is expected to rise from below 6,000 in 2011 to over 60,000 in 2021. The review added that high-risk businesses can seize good opportunities in such fields of infrastructure, information technology, and development of human resources in Vietnamese market in the future. Other forums hosted by the Vietnam Chamber of Commerce and Industry, Hungarian business executives said expanding ties with Vietnam plays an important role in the implementation of their government's policy of looking east. The cooperation also enables Vietnam firms to tap into the large European market, with Hungary acting as a gateway. Mr. László Pares, president of the Hungarian Chamber of Commerce and Industry, said Vietnam was his country's 13th biggest trade partner in Asia last year, and in 4th and 6th places among ASEAN member countries in terms of buying from Hungary and selling to it. Hungary's exports to Vietnam are mostly pharmaceuticals, office and data processing equipment, industrial machinery and parts, food and electrical machinery, appliances, and instruments. According to the VCCI, trade between the two countries is over $100 million a year on average, despite the recession. Last year, it stood at $148 million, after increasing by over 22% year-on-year. Vietnam imports from Hungary shot up 38% to $88 million. As of the end of last month, Hungary had invested nearly $51 million in 13 projects in Vietnam. The two countries have agreed to boost cooperation in fields like agriculture, pharmaceuticals, and energy. After 2 years of deployment, the Vietnam Automated Cargo and Port Consolidated System and Vietnam Custom Information System will be deployed in 34 provincial municipal custom departments across the country on June 25th. Funded by the government of Japan, this project is based on techniques and technologies applied by Japanese customs authorities and government. Hence, the Vietnam Automated Cargo and Port Consolidated System and Vietnam Custom Information System, or VNACCS and VCIS, is expected to become an effective tool for Vietnamese custom authorities and the government, and helps the business community carry out custom clearance procedures. The VNACCS and VICS system automates many tasks, like automatically determining the tax rate for each SS code, including special preferential tax rates in accordance with agreements with other nations, and calculating duties on specific merchandise in every declaration sheet, automatically storing modifiable declaration forms. This is a huge benefit for enterprises where they do custom procedures. The reception and operation of VNACCS and VCIS system will directly improve the efficiency of customs clearance of imported goods, thus facilitating trade and enhancing Vietnam's economic competitiveness. The operation of this system will help the government of Vietnam to realize its objectives in the custom development strategy in 2011-2020 period and initially meets its commitments to deployment of single window national custom mechanism and participation in the ASEAN single window.
It's time for the import and export activities across the country. Data from the General Statistics Office revealed Vietnam were estimated to run $400 million of trade deficit this month, comparing with $810 million trade surplus in April. In details, Vietnam exported $12 billion worth of goods in May, down 8% from April, while it imported $12.4 billion worth of goods, higher than $12.3 billion import values of last month, making a trade deficit of $400 million. In the month, export of cassava, machinery, equipment and spare parts reported the highest falls in the month, while exports of rubber soared by 27% in the month. Exports of mobile phones and accessories reported the highest value with $2.5 billion, followed by garment and textile with nearly $1.5 billion, footwear with $800 million. The foreign direct investment sector reported $1.1 billion of trade surplus this month. In January and May period, Vietnam exports rose 15% on year to $58.5 billion, while imports values increased 10% on year to $56.8 billion, making a trade surplus of $1.6 billion. The FDI sector ran $15 billion of trade surplus in the period. Circular number 16 and 19 issued by the State Bank of Vietnam stipulated that from April 15, 2014, enterprises selling their debts to the VAMC and being able to pay their debts and improve their conditions are eligible to a lower interest rate of 10.7%. Once the VAMC collects the interest of the debt, will the VAMC or credit institutions be the most beneficial? What's the meaning of the lower interest rate to the relevant size? Let's watch the following report for more insights. The biggest benefit that Namstone Joint Stock Company enjoys when selling its non-performing loans to the VMC is the lending interest rate is brought down significantly. As the company had been burdening incredibly high rate earlier, the rate cut is a great relief to it.
VMC thì hỗ trợ doanh nghiệp thì thứ nhất là cái lãi suất quá hạn và cũng như là lãi suất cho vay trước là thì khả năng được miễn một phần, nhất là cái lãi quá hạn là chắc được miễn. Thế vì hai nữa là cái thời gian cơ cấu lại nợ thì kéo dài được lên tầm độ 5-6 năm nữa. Thì như thế cái thời gian trả nợ của các doanh nghiệp đó là tốt lên. Và một phần nữa là cái lãi suất thì đang 20 mấy %, trước chúng tôi vay 20 mấy % mà đến bây giờ thì giảm xuống còn tầm độ 10%. Như thế thì rõ ràng là có lợi hỗ trợ quá nhiều.
The VMC said it has been prudent in slashing the lending rate to 10.7%, whose calculation was based on the average lending interest rate of Vietnam's 5 national commercial banks. Profits of the rate collected by the VMC would be paid back to local credit institutions, while a very small part of it would be enjoyed by the VMC. However, the preferential rate is by no means applicable to all firms.
Theo quy chế và thông tư được quy định của 16 của Hội đồng thành viên công ty quản lý nợ cũng như là thông tư 19 thì tất cả những khoản nợ về nguyên tắc tất cả những khoản nợ sẽ điều chỉnh về cái mức lãi suất theo từng thời điểm của VMC công bố và cái mức lãi suất đó sau khi thu về thì sẽ được chuyển trả cho các tổ chức tín dụng chứ không phải là VMC được hưởng lợi từ những cái mức mà điều chỉnh lãi suất đó. Tuy nhiên là khi điều chỉnh lãi suất đó là để tạo điều kiện cho doanh nghiệp có cái cơ hội để là khắc phục vượt qua khó khăn để từng bước ổn định và trả được phần nợ mới cũng như là một phần nợ cũ. Tôi cho rằng đây là một trong những cái giải pháp là hết sức linh hoạt và tất nhiên là không phải tất cả các khoản nợ cũng đều được điều chỉnh về mức lãi suất là 10% mà chỉ điều chỉnh về cái mức lãi suất 10% đối với doanh nghiệp là có khả năng là trả nợ gốc và lãi cho tổ chức tín dụng cũng như là cho VMC.
Obviously, firms rather than the VMC nor lenders will be the most beneficial from the rate cut. Banks will lose part of their profit, but the move will help local firms overcome challenges, gradually pay the debts to banks, and be able to continue getting credit from banks for their operations.
Vâng, đấy chính cái hoạt động của VMC đã giúp cho doanh nghiệp. Cái thứ nhất, như trước đây chúng ta hiểu thì thông thường VMC chỉ giúp cho các cái ngân hàng, các cái tổ chức tín dụng lành mạnh hóa cái tài chính của mình thông qua cái việc là bán nợ xấu cho VMC và nhận lại các cái trái phiếu đặc biệt. Tuy nhiên trong trường hợp của Việt Nam thì cái điểm quan trọng và then chốt nhất đó là giúp cho các doanh nghiệp, tức là những cái khách hàng của các ngân hàng có thể là rũ bỏ được các cái nghĩa vụ có liên quan đến cái nợ xấu cũ, và đồng thời là họ có thể tiếp cận được với cả các cái nguồn vốn tín dụng mới, tức là thay đổi các cái điều kiện để tiếp cận tín dụng, và thông qua đó thì giúp cho doanh nghiệp có thể cải thiện cái trạng thái hay cái điều kiện tiếp cận tín dụng của mình, và có thể là để phục hồi sau khi mà đã gạt sang một bên những cái mối lo về cái nợ xấu, thì VMC đã làm được cả việc này.
Even though the VMC has been in operation for a short time, it has made certain achievements. That is, banks got their non-performing loan pressure reduced, while firms are facilitated to operate normally, which is a positive sign for the whole economy. If the VMC can do its job better, its achievements would be much more encouraging. Vietnam GDP growth stood at 4.96%, while inflation hit the record low level of 4.389% in the past 13 years in Q1 of 2014. What are the prospects of development for Vietnam's economy in the next quarters, and what are the major threats to economic growth? Regarding the issue, we had a talk with Mr. Dominic Miller, the economic specialist of the ADB in Vietnam. Mr. Dominic Miller, thank you so much for joining our program today on VITV channel. Shall we start with the outlook for Vietnam's economy and the potential level of growth for 2014-2015 period?
Sure. Our forecast is for the GDP growth to recover slightly, continue recovering from last year was 5.4%. We expect it to pick up to 5.6% and then 5.8%. The main reason we expect the growth to pick up is because of the support on the fiscal side, the fiscal easing, and also we're seeing committed disbursements from FDI, also supporting the construction and manufacturing industries to pick up off the low base. But still the economy remains below the potential because we are seeing domestic investment quite weak as with the ongoing banking sector restructuring, and also consumer demand is very weak as well. And on the inflation side, we expect inflation to remain subdued because of the weak consumer demand, and we also expect inflation exchange rate to remain stable because of the strong FDI and remittance flows.
You have mentioned that Vietnam posted the record low Q1 consumer price index in the first quarter of 2014. That has got some concerns over the low consumption demand and its potential negative impacts on economic growth. What's your take?
The inflation is low because of both external and internal factors, but yes, I think there is a concern that domestic demand is very weak, and that the State Bank of Vietnam's monetary policy measures to try to boost credit growth through high liquidity and reductions in interest rates so far haven't had that effect. And we think that it's probably because it's not a supply side problem, that it's more of a demand side problem.
What should be done to boost Vietnam consumption demand and economic growth?
So, like I said, I think we need to work on the demand side. So what I mean by that is that for example, in Vietnam, a lot of businesses are first-generation household, informal sector businesses. And sometimes they don't have business management skill that allow them to go to the bank and to apply for a loan to access credit. So I think the government need to try and support over the medium to long term those kind of business development skills for the general public. And also the other issues on the collateral. The commercial banks, the way they assess risk is still based on traditional method of assessing collateral, and sometimes it's very difficult for these small household rural businesses to put forward the necessary collateral to access credit. So I think also we need to look at the way commercial banks assess their risk. May need to be changed to consider for these types of informal household businesses.
Apart from low consumption demand, what are the risks facing Vietnam in the future?
Well, the other risks to the short-term economic growth are on the external side, like if the world economy, for example, China is continue to slow to the global demand, which would hurt Vietnam as an export country. And then domestically, the main risk is around the ongoing non-performing loan problem in the banking sector. The government has taken a lot of measures to try and address them, but they still exist, and there's a lot of work still to be done.
What about the PPP or the infrastructure in Vietnam?
Okay, yeah, quality of infrastructure in Vietnam is lagging behind other countries in the region. And as the labor cost in Vietnam increase, it's important that Vietnam can close the gap on its infrastructure if it wants to remain competitive. Yeah. And the new PPP law that the government is working on this year can potentially facilitate transfer of finance, technology, and expertise into infrastructure to improve the inclusiveness and quality of social and physical infrastructure in Vietnam.
And finally, what should the government do in short and mid-term to boost economic growth?
The short term, they have to continue to try and close the gap between the domestic and international standards of regulations. So, whether it's on various factors such as, competition laws, intellectual property rights, ensuring a level playing field, and the way that you account and measure NPLs, the disclosure policies of state-owned enterprises. They need to close that information gap. Into the medium-term challenge is to ensure that these regulations are actually enforced adequately. You cannot having quality international standard regulations is just the first step. Then you need to ensure that they are enforced. And the only way to ensure they are enforced is to increase the capacity of oversight agencies or overlooking SOEs in the banking sector so that they are in a position to enforce the new regulations.
And thank you so much for joining our program today.
You're welcome. Thank you.
As usual, the final part is the summary of the local securities market between May the 19th and May the 23rd. Well, that's all for now. Thank you so much for your attention. For comments and feedback, you can reach us by email at intovietnam@vitv.vn or give us a call at 0422208888. Goodbye and enjoy your weekend.